Welcome to Successful Parenting, where we, Jackie Rue and Robin Choquette, share practical skills for families to build resilience and healthy connections. As practicing professionals and parents ourselves, we hope this podcast is a resource for parents to grow, reflect, and learn more about themselves and their children. Our approach is simple, tangible, and most importantly, we lead with compassion for the integrity of the families we serve. This podcast should not be taken as medical advice and is intended for informational purposes only. We love our work, and we can't wait to watch families gain confidence and open themselves up to new ways of successful parenting.
Hello, Robin.
Hey there, Jackie.
How are you doing in Kansas today?
I am great. The weather is nice and steamy. We're recording this during a kind of high heat time, and I'm okay with the heat. I always think, well, that tells me it's summer, and that's okay. So how about you? What are you doing these days?
I like summer mostly. Obviously, I love the sun, and I love that it's light later. I love to be outside, sitting outside late at night. But I don't do as well in the heat. I'm one that likes to run a lot and walk outside and do different physical stuff outside. And I have found this summer, it's been a little bit more challenging for me. I get tired quicker and I'm a little bit more run down. I think we're going to have a little break in the heat. So I'm looking forward to that. But overall, I have seen a lot of children and teens outside playing sports.
Yes.
We have a soccer field behind our house and a basketball court. And there are just kids all the time, ramping up and getting ready for the fall season. And so that's been fun.
Yes. We're a home filled with athletes, coaches, directors, so many different things going on, and it's all ramping back up. The students and athletes are coming back on campus. It's an exciting time of year, right?
Yes. And I'm excited about our guest expert today. She has so much experience and knowledge. Her name is Kate Schneider, and she has been working in this field for quite a while. She has specialized in helping teens and adults with mental health issues and addiction issues. She works with trauma and anxiety and depression. One thing I love is that most recently she has really been focusing her work on the student athlete. Kate has recently wrote a book that is flying off the shelf and is awesome. And it really is going to speak to that student athlete and just different approaches for coaches, although parents and athletes have found it helpful too. And so I'm excited to take a dive into this conversation because much of the work that I do, and I know you do, Robin, is working with coaches and athletes. And we have seen a big uprise in mental health, as well as just some of our work on working with coaches across the United States on trauma-informed, as well as, identifying and responding to mental health issues that their athletes might have. So I thought no one better than to join our conversation than Kate. And so I'm excited to hear about her book and let listeners know and just have a conversation today.
Yes. Welcome, Kate.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you for having me, Robin and Jackie. I'm looking forward to having this discussion. It's such a nice introduction. I appreciate that.
Kate, tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this work and, your focus on athletes.
Really, what brought me to it was my own experience as a coach's daughter and coming from a family of 5. My younger 3 siblings played Division I sports. And so it's always been very much a part of my life. And as my own children, I have 4 kids of my own that all play sports, either currently or in the past. And watching so many young athletes struggle to manage it all. When you say student athlete, I think that's where my focus really started to wake up, is watching my kids, knowing my experience, my clients, and seeing how difficult it is to maintain all this, perfectionism. Can I be a good student? Can I be a good athlete? And what really does that mean? And so as I started to have the conversation with my own kids around how are they metricing success on and off the field, and it really became clear that they needed support in certain areas. And I felt that my background as a coach's daughter and then as a clinician, maybe I could help out in that way, whether it was visualization and breathing, which came pretty naturally, or the feedback loop stuff that was a little trickier. How are they talking to themselves? What was that inner critic saying? And so I felt inspired in my work in the office and at home with my kids to take it to another level and start to write about it and see if people were interested. So my background in a nutshell.
Yeah, so fascinating. In terms of your approach, can you give us a little bit about how it all came together in creating this book, or was this your approach prior?
It's a little bit of both. So
Okay.
it was formalized once I worked with one of the schools near where my kids played. And they asked me to come in and help the team with mindset. I was very excited to work with the team, and it was the basketball varsity team in the area. So it got me thinking, how can I help coaches implementing mindfulness or a certain mindset, let's say, in their practices? We ask so much of coaches. Lots of them are teachers at the high school level and even at the collegiate level. Some are both. And I felt they needed a little bit of help on how we do that. How do we implement it? What I would hear feedback from was, I can't find a way in that hour or 2 hour practice to set aside for mindset. And I thought, yes, you can. Let me give you ideas. Let me give you 1 to 10-minute activities of how we can introduce some of the mental aspect of the game. That is really where the edge is. So many teams focus on the physical part and talk about the mental part, but don't actually infuse it. And I think it's just a lack of how do I do it? So when I was asked to come in, it had me think about exercises that could be implemented into the practice. From, at the free throw line, can we think about taking a deep breath? Can we, before practice, check in with how we're talking about the practice? Can we focus on teamwork? In what ways? So it became, I set it out once I was working with the team, but the approach really came from me wanting to help coaches that are already asked to wear so many different hats. They're asked to be therapists, parents, coaches, and it was really in a way to assist them in the work and show them that it's not as difficult as it may seem to integrate that and to get the mental edge. So then I worked with them all year. I don't take credit for this, but the team went the furthest they've ever gone in 30 years, the deepest run, won regionals. It caught fire with one of the local newspapers. And so they started to buy in more and more throughout the year. And I do believe that buy-in created a really tight team. And then the success went from there. So it was a very fun experience.
Cool.
That's awesome. And what are some tips that you share with parents to foster athleticism in children? Just some key skills or tips? Because I know so often parents will say they want to help motivate and they want to kind of instill some of these intrinsic kind of motivators with their children. What are some of the ways or tips that you share?
It's a good question. I do get asked that quite a bit, and I'm careful with how I answer parents because usually the answer is do nothing. Usually I advise do very little. But when they want to talk to their athletes, I think it's really important to understand and be curious about how your athlete identifies success. And then from there, using your own experience on regulating emotions to weave into the sport. Back to, do you ever think about taking a deep breath? Do you visualize success? Do you ever, before you go to bed, think about how you want to play on the court? So more curious, less teaching. Because I find with my kids and athletes in general, they have an idea and they just want the space to talk about it without being told. They're often being told, how do you get better? How do you do it? So to me, it's more, we can foster athleticism by understanding what is success to them in the first place. Maybe success is being a part of the team, being a part of the culture. Maybe success is being the team leader. Maybe the success is being the highest scoring person on the team or on the court. Really understanding and being curious, and then opening up that dialogue around different types of mindset and what do they feel would give them that edge. Every athlete has a pretty good idea of when they are not in the zone, when they're not in the flow, and they can let you know, it might come from preparation. It might come from the way I talk about myself. It might come from my parents' voice being too loud. And if we, I think, go into the conversation really open and curious, we allow the space for the athlete to say, it's really helpful for me if you don't yell out during the game, or if you don't ask me right when I get in the car after the game, how did I feel? What did the coach say? So again, I guess it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I think we can foster it by being curious, being open, and just talking about mindset in a very positive way.
I like that. I completely agree, because I think that curiosity approach is much different. I think really helps them to foster their own independence in thinking. And that's a huge piece, right? When we look at grassroots coaching and starting off, that's something that we really want to foster in young athletes, that ability to look internal and then also to see what are the opportunities around me to be able to execute what I want to do. Really like that. And I agree with that in so many ways. One question question, Kate, I often get, and I'm sure you have as well, and Jackie does too. The parent calls and is talking about their athlete. They need that competitive drive. What are your thoughts? Do you think it's something that an individual is born with, or do you think that's something that we can teach?
I personally think we have a ceiling to it, similar to learning or intelligence, right? That there is a ceiling to competitiveness. There's a spectrum. So do I think we teach it? No, I think we foster it. When parents ask me that question, I often come back with, if that's not their nature, it's not their nature. They may be competing by not competing. I don't know if you've ever heard that. I find that to be a funny phrase, that's very true. Mm-hmm. People in general compete by not competing because of the environment that they're in, the fear of failure. So those are two separate things. To answer your question, no, I don't think it can be taught. I think we can create an environment where it's okay to win and it's okay to lose, and that we've gotten a little bit away from that in our culture. So we can foster it by, in family environments, let's go do this. Let's go play and let it be okay to win. Let it be okay to lose. And we often see in family dynamics, oh, that's a super competitive family. So sure, I think some are born with it, and then you hit a higher level because it's fostered in your home, and not always in the most healthy way, but certainly those are better environments when they are. The game itself is what's fun. So I do get asked that, and I always smile when I do, because some people, that's not why they play. They right. don't play for the reason that that edge to win. They're okay, but either way. So, good question.
I like how you said that too. I think for many kids, if they believe that they can, contribute to the team, or if they believe that they can, get better at something they're doing, they're going to want to do it more. But I think, for some athletes, they believe that they're not measuring up, they can't. And then they kind of have that lower frustration tolerance, and you might see them kind of back off, or like you said, scared to fail or make a mistake. Is it okay for them to fail just as much as it is for them to win?
Right. That's something I do think everyone talks about participation, right? And that we made it not okay to fail. So I do believe we're responsible for some of that. And we have to help correct course. It's okay. It's part of growing and learning. Let's not fear that. Let's embrace that failure as an opportunity. I agree with what you just said.
Mm-hmm. And I know you have a lot of strategies that you teach when you're working one-on-one or when you're working with teams. What are some of the key strategies that you would share with our listeners?
My favorite to share would be feedback loop. I personally think how an athlete talks to themselves is the center point of the limitations that they create. Really understanding how your child talks to themselves, your athlete, you yourself, if you're listening to this, if you're an athlete, pay attention to the language you have right before a game, during a game, and after, and replace it with something that doesn't get in the way. Let's change that, just that little bit, just something believable, not from I stink to I was amazing, because that's not believable to you. It wasn't your best game. That reframe is really important, and it pretty quickly changes the way an athlete behaves. If we can just get in the mind and understand how they're talking to themselves, make a quick course correct on it, and see if over time we can build that skill around. It's basic cognitive behavioral therapy. You two know that, but others don't. So just know how you talk, replace it with something a little less harsh, start to work on that, build on that, and see if that changes your attitude, your feeling about the game, about the practice. Probably my favorite place and one of the harder places to start. And then the easiest place to start with young athletes is acknowledging how we all let our brain drift during the sport itself. Whether or not it's fans cheering, the coach yelling, your parents there, whatever it might be, we drift out of the moment. And we are our best selves, whether it's a good day or a bad day, when we are in the moment. So little tricks around tapping into your senses are my favorite. All of my clients, athletes I work with, I usually go to touch first. So if you're a softball player, how does the stitching feel in your hand? And doing that 1 minute of practice, just try it. And then when it gets to game time and you're starting to feel that nervousness or that moment where you freeze up, go into touch. If you're somebody that doesn't play a sport with a ball in hand, touch your jersey. Find something else you can touch. It's a really good grounding exercise that all of my athletes buy into this. In fact, I had a young softball player who was having near panic attacks on the mound. And I said, this week only, I want you to, in practice, feel the stitching. That very next game, when she started to feel her chest tighten, she recalled that activity and has not had a panic attack since. Again, I don't take credit for that. It was just the teaching of that. Get in the moment. When we're ahead of ourselves is when we start to get real nervous. The panic starts to play off. When we play tight, we make mistakes. And so it's very self-fulfilling. So those are my two favorite, I would say, is touch and any of your senses. Tapping into the moment, know how you talk to yourself is the hardest. And then the in-between stuff around visualization and breathing are really fun ones as well.
I think it is interesting because individuals that I've worked with, we talk about what is their favorite, and kind of back to your curiosity. I think it's helping them to individualize and really creating it to be their own and how they can do that. How would you encourage parents to help to foster the strategy building in their children? And how do you teach children?
Well, I really do think fostering it is doing it. For me, I really practice what I preach. I find that when I can connect on my own experience, so I try this stuff out and I apply it. We don't have to be competing at a high level to benefit from any of these activities. So I will try a breathing exercise and I'll say to my son then, I did this thing and then, my day was better, or I do run. So my run was better. And because I'm doing it, it feels we're in it together. Or I, watch, of course, all the social media. The kids love that, right? So a TikTok. And so I'll send them that. Any little bits of visualization or things that work for me, I try and connect with my kids and say, just try it. And I'm curious what it felt like to you to do that. Also, I force my boys before they leave to do a reframe on something. When I catch them saying something negative, I will say, let's replace that. Again, this is stuff, if you do it off the court, they will practice that and they will bring it to the sport. So those are the ways that I do it with my own kids, with my own athletes, is say, I'll do it right here with you. This is why it's worked for me. These are the moments it hasn't worked. And just really opening up the conversation on a regular basis, because it does apply to regulation emotionally beyond sports, into the workforce, into managing other failures. And so I really try to infuse it in other aspects beyond the game, so it doesn't feel like I'm angling for them to be successful in that game that night. It's really in life.
I like that too. And I think the three of us are all parents. And my girls, they played sports, not in college, but in high school. But as parents, we all make mistakes. We all say the wrong things and we catch ourselves and we're like, oh, we know we shouldn't have said that. And sometimes I think, and I've been there too, where you're like more involved in the game than the child is. And you're like, you might as well be out there playing. We know kind of to take a step back. And for us, we really have to let that child kind of take the reins. And I think sometimes even overpraising when they do something well or overpraising when they win. We talk a lot about not focusing so much on the outcome, but more on the steps that they took. I loved how you cheered on the other player. I loved how you were able to bounce back when you had that mistake versus focusing on the mistake they made or focusing everything on the win as opposed to all the things that got them there. Are there other things that you would advise to parents maybe not to do or not to say?
Sure.
Just really in the efforts of trying to kind of build up that resiliency and build up that athlete and promoting that engagement in the sport?
For sure. My dad, funny man, he learned years ago, all you're supposed to say, he has 3 daughters in the field, is I've enjoyed watching you play. And no matter what, because that's true to his experience, he says it after every game.
I like that.
Yeah. And that really lets a kid know, again, it's okay whether you won or whether you lost. I enjoyed that experience of being witness to it and being here. And so when we do that, our children, I think, start to trust that they can share with us their inner thoughts versus, they're going to want to just talk about what the coach said or how I could be better. First of all, we have to maybe practice saying it so we believe it. And the other part is when they first get in the car, they need a minute. And so letting them know, hey, I'm here if you ever want to talk, but also maybe you don't want to talk and that there's somewhere else that it feels safer and that's okay. So really advise parents, give them the room. I find that my boys talk to me when I'm making them food. And that's when they'll do that. My daughter, it's let's just go eat or on a car ride. And it's not forced and it's not this rhythm of expectation. You finish the game and now you have to dissect it with me. Instead, it's if you want to talk about it, I'm here, or I'm just checking in. So give them the room, give them that, offer that you're there supportively. And it's really fun when then they come to you and say, hey, I'm frustrated or I'm having a hard time. And now it feels more collaborative, generally healthier. And I think there was studies years back that, and I think you were starting to allude to that at one point, Jackie, that athletes report the worst part of playing a sport is getting in the car with their parents afterwards. And I thought that was so disturbing and telling. So I really encourage parents to take a step back, let them know that you're there.
Absolutely. And I think even sometimes the things that get said, at one point my daughter played softball and she was the catcher, and she would say there'd be a parent like standing right behind her making comments.
Yeah.
You missed that. Or, and she's like, that's the worst part. It's not the other players. It's not the coaches. Having someone right there in those comments. Any athlete really in that position, whether you're a pitcher or catcher, whether you're out there, I think so often the comments that are made are the things that are the most hurtful.
I agree. And I also like what you said about being human and making mistakes as a parent. I think one of the things for me that I've learned is how much my kids enjoy when I acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a funny story of parent fail. I am highly competitive, and I do think that can take over and really turn into something we're not proud of as parents. A lot of those parents I've seen off the court, and they're so kind, and then they get on the court and they lose their minds, right? And yet I understand how that can wake up inside of you. I want to win, right? So I had a moment like that watching my son play. He wasn't being aggressive in my mind. And so he looked up in the stands, and I was in a determined look, I suppose, like trying to will this aggressiveness in a very close basketball game. And afterwards, this might be the parent win, is he said, "Don't ever look at me like that again." Okay. And I laughed. I said, "I don't know, Ben. I lost my mind. I just got so in it." And we laughed about it. And I said, "I'm so sorry. That was really intense and not okay. I got taken over by my own desire to win." And admitting failure there. Never too late to revisit a moment where maybe you made a bad decision as a parent. I've had many of those, and I think the repairs the kids remember more than the mistakes themselves. I'd like to believe anyway.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I think our time is winding down. It has been a great conversation. Thank you so much, Kate.
Oh, thank you, Robin.
Are you ready for our 3 questions?
I am very excited.
Okay, here we go. I will read the 3, and you can make the choice. You can answer 1, 2, or you can answer all 3. It's really up to you.
Okay.
Number 1, what did you do as a child or teenager that would drive your parents crazy? Number 2, what is the biggest difference between children and teenagers today versus when you were growing up? And number 3, what does successful parenting mean to you?
Very good questions. I'll answer all 3. The first one is easy. I was relentless and did not accept no as a child. I can look back and picture my annoying self, whether it was asking for another Oreo or a friend to sleep over. I wore them down, and so that drove them crazy. And I was gifted with a child just the same, so some sort of payback. So my second, I think, is teed up for a negative answer, so I'm going to try not to do that. The biggest difference, I'm going to give 2 answers. One, I think kids today are they just go for it. They have this confidence in a lot of ways to just take on more than I feel my generation had. So that part's a positive. I think opportunity, kids jump on in a way that I know I did not at the young age. On the flip side of maybe something we created, I find kids today struggle more with interpersonal conflict than our generation. And I do blame us and social media for that. I find it's really hard for people to confront something head on in face to face. I feel sad about it. So that's a big difference, something I think we all see right now. And I'm really trying to encourage my kids just go right at something and be uncomfortable. Get comfortable being uncomfortable is something I say to them and to clients. So yeah, that's my answer to that one. And then lastly, successful parenting. For me, I think it's how I metric it is that my kids feel they can come to me for emotional support and that I know they're human and that they're going to make mistakes and that I'll always be here for it and in it with them. So that's how I metric it, because if we look at all of parenting, I think we touched on this. We're failing all the time. There's some need I'm not meeting of one of my kids and I don't know it maybe. If they can come to me and know it's safe to share their emotions and their struggles, I think I'm doing okay. So that's that one.
I like it.
Oh, thanks.
I really like this conversation. I love all the work you're doing in our communities. And I hope you keep plugging along. And I'm excited to see what's next in your next book and just all the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to the both of you. I hope you survived that heat, Robin, down south. And Jackie and I will do what we can up here in the humid Chicago. So
yes.
Yeah, hey, Kate, you want to go for a run right now? It's a nice 94 degrees. And sunny.
Oh, too funny.
Okay, I will catch you all later. Have a great day and a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Jackie. Thank you for joining us, and make sure to subscribe and like us to catch our next episode, where we will take you on a journey to find new ways of successful parenting.